Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
How are y'all?
Good. I was wondering if you and Bill were gonna do it together.
Oh yeah. We've got all sorts of jerry-riggedness around this house right now.
Okay, so he's asking to be admitted, but I want to talk about him real quick before we do.
He's gonna
First of all,
creep out into the kitchen.
I'm sorry I'm late. My son stayed at my apartment all weekend and completely fucked up all of my equipment. Just for reasons I cannot even know.
Was it YY?
No, it was Hunt. He took care of the dog. So, so we should get this clear that Bill Kirk is not only a, executive director at MKM, which is, a very respected investment firm, but he's also your husband.
Right. Yes, he is.
And so
I snagged him fair and square.
I
took him down.
He snagged you. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let him in. Oh, he can hear us. He can hear us.
Yeah, you're gonna let me in. That's the Jersey.
It's all very ancestral. All right. Let's let Bill in. Hola. Okay, so I was going to talk about you off camera, but since you're on, I wanted to say that so Bill Kirk, executive director, MKM, covers beverages and cannabis. One of the things, let me tell you what I like about Bill. And I've known Bill longer than even Jenn has a little bit. Bill is an Amy. Do you want me to turn you back out? Maybe let me put you back in the, let me mute you. Bill is one of those guys who's like super amiable and very friendly, but also super smart. And, he's like one of those rare jocks. He's like athletic, plus he knows numbers, which, I don't even know those people. They're very rare. And I also want to point out that Bill and Jenn met each other at one of our beer summits. And so, a little bit of a plug here, but if you want to marry one of our employees, just come to the beer summit. There's like a 50-50 chance. No, but thanks for being on here, Bill. We appreciate it. And I know Jenn and Jordan have questions for you, but I just wanted to just ask so, cause I don't even really know this cause Jenn and I haven't talked about it, but do y'all talk shop when you're on date night? Do you talk about beer and stocks and cannabis, or do you just really just talk about your kids?
The simple answer is yes. And a point of clarification is, Harry, you and I met about 7 seconds before Jenn and I met, and you weren't quite charming. You weren't quite charming enough. So the second person I met at the summit is the love.
Yes. Well, you know what? Beer summits where fairy tales come true. Can we use that? Can we trademark that? Can we get behind that? Can we quote you, Bill, as saying, you know what? You know why I like the beer summit? It's because where love fairy tales come true.
You can quote me and attribute something to me that you said. That's fine.
I do it all the time to analysts. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So
but to answer the question, yes, it's what we talk about. It's what we even argue about. If you had to guess what Jenn and I would get in a real argument over, it's going to be this stuff. I mean, we love it, and it's controversial at times.
So in preparation for this talk, and this will be the last question, Jenn, and I'll leave it to you guys. But one of the things I thought was about a week ago, you wrote about, the BPI index, the NBWA's kind of intent. It kind of is a leading indicator. And you pointed out that the margin between F&B seltzer and total beer hasn't been this wide since 2016 or something. And meaning that we're going to see probably heavy inventories in late summer, August, September of seltzers out there. And you say, either there's going to be pricing or there's, I don't know, you gave 3 scenarios, all they weren't great. So a week later, is there anything different that you're seeing out there, or that is altered from that assessment?
No. So this was the last major holiday weekend, right? Labor Day was the last chance for everybody to sell through their seltzer. If they still have it today, they are going to be very stuck with it, right? The seasonality of the drop off is still quite sharp for seltzers. So October, November, December, those cases aren't going to move, right? If you have cases today, it's going to be hard to move them tomorrow. And so we'll look to see what you guys say about how Labor Day went, but that was the last real weekend for everybody. Constellation is going to have to destroy more cases, right? More brands are going to get discontinued. And I think you guys put up that photo out in, was it Arizona? No, was it Vegas or Arizona, where the Michelob Ultra seltzers were $3 a 12 pack, right? I think 25 cents a can. So I think
that might have been a kind of an offshoot, but
Yeah,
I mean you're
Arizona.
right. There's definitely inventory. There's definitely inventory out there, and just like you said, if we don't blow through, I guess my question is, like, how are we going to see a price war within seltzers? I mean, or are those days past us? In other words, is the kind of the industry consolidated enough that everybody knows that 2005 maybe isn't a great year to reproduce?
Normally, I think you could say it's consolidated enough, but the leader, right, the share leader, White Claw, is down the most, 20 some percent or whatever it would be in Nielsen. When the leader's down the most, you don't have that like really rational marketplace. If everybody's trends are the same, fine, the marketplace can remain rational. But when the share leader is bleeding the most share, I think that's when you get a bit more price sensitive. And if you have these deals running, whether it's Truly at some of the high V's in the Midwest, when they're that cheap, are you going to buy any other seltzer, right? If you can buy 4 cases of Michelob Ultra seltzer for the price of 1 case of Truly, right? You're going to buy the 4, right? If that's the option. So when you have that kind of deal, it's really hard to keep that loyalty, that brand loyalty, when you're being paid essentially to go drink that product.
Listen, Biscuit gets paid to sit here and just all she has to do is be awake for the 30-minute period of the day for the podcast. That's all our job is. And look,
close. I've seen some movement.
Well, I don't know, Bill. All right. Well, listen, I'd like to talk to you about cannabis, but I think your wife wants to ask you a few questions about that. So let's her put you on the hot seat for once.
Bring it, Jen.
Bring it.
Well, I'm so glad that I don't think y'all heard Bella screaming upstairs, who we had to lock in her room for 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh. You do not let her be on. Listen, future beverage analyst of America.
No, this is really funny. So I went up there. I texted Jordan. I said, Jordan, you start the questioning because I got to help Bella real quick. So I run up there and all she wanted to do was hand me her bottle. Like, she couldn't just leave it right there. She had to hand it to me. Just like the other day, Bill said, tell him the story about cashews and Bella, Bill.
Oh, geez. So brands matter, Harry. Bella wanted some cashews. And
that's what I hear.
I brought her a sandwich bag full of random cashews. And I hand it to her and she says, no, I want the bag with the name on it. She doesn't want generic cashews in a sandwich bag. She needs a branded cashews.
Wow. Listen, we train them young as Americans to be brand loyal so that we can have an economy to proliferate this dream that apparently started in the 50s. I don't know. This is according to my grandparents. Biscuit doesn't care.
Yeah.
But yeah. I want to talk. So Jen, I know you want to talk, but my overarching question is cannabis a real market? And it's obviously a real market. That's the wrong question. The question is, I mean, can't you, if it's legal, just Jen, you ask him the questions. I don't even know where to start.
No, that's a really good point. And we do talk about this sometimes, right? Like, cannabis industry is a bit of a shit show, right? It's there, but just because it's there, does it mean that it's real or going to grow? And I mean, what's your take on that, Bill?
The problems have mostly been above the border, right? They've been mostly Canadian problems. Canada was really early, one of the first large countries to legalize cannabis. and the equity markets went crazy. Everybody just wanted to give these Canadian companies money to grow as much weed as possible with little, I guess they gave little thought to costs. They gave little thoughts to even quality, and they got stuck in Canada with a bunch of very mediocre weed at high prices, and nobody can make money, right? When that's the issue. So Canada makes no money. The US, these companies are profitable today. They're huge. They're not the marquee names, because they're just in limited states. But if you take Curaleaf, they're a $1+ billion going toward $2 billion annual revenue company, right? I mean, that's a serious business, but it's not in every state, and it doesn't really get the visibility that the Canadians get. So I guess, Jen, I think my point would be the problem that everybody gets stuck on is the marquee names are the Canadian names, and the problems were and are still in Canada.
Yeah. So, and I'll let Jordan take this too, because I know that he has a bunch of questions here and he's actually probably better positioned for the questioning line than I am. But my question for the US is, obviously you've been covering this industry for a couple of years now, and you've seen as much as I have that a lot of the bev-alc industries are kind of setting up their silos to be able to get into this, right? Whether it's suppliers or distributors, right? But do you see those synergies between cannabis and, the beverage alcohol industry paying off, coming to fruition in the next few years? Or is that sort of not as, synergistic as maybe some of them might hope it would be?
I would think that the distribution is going to be pretty different. In some cases, it may end up being different accounts, but also when you have lightweight cannabis flower on really heavy liquid trucks, that there isn't really much synergy there. That the PepsiCo bottlers don't really move around Frito-Lay chips, right? They don't move around the light chip bags. They stick to their heavy canned beverages. So the stuff doesn't really go on the same trucks too often. I mean, unless you're talking about a distributor that already has a pretty big food account, maybe. But the stuff doesn't go really well on the same trucks, and a lot of times the accounts are going to be completely different, right? The distributors aren't stopping today at dispensaries, so it's not like we're just going to bring more stuff to the same number of stops. We're going to bring more stuff to more stops, and there's not much synergy there when you add more to both sides.
Right. But what about the suppliers too, right? You've got a bunch of people, you've got Molson Coors with the Hexo deal, right? That JV. And I wonder, and maybe nobody knows this, but like, let's say weed does get legalized. Are they going to be able to bring those brands here in the US? Is that going to be legal? Or is it just more about having that expertise and, knowing how to kind of build a cannabis brand, that sort of thing?
They'll be able to bring the brands, they'll be able to bring the IP, but it would depend on how the legislation's written. They might not be able to bring the weed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bring the brand name down and put it on something they've manufactured here in the US. But depending on what form of legalization ultimately takes, we might not take imports of Canadian weed for a while. I mean, why would we? Let's grow it ourselves. Let's keep the jobs, keep the taxation here. That's obviously not what all the Canadian companies would want. It would be the opposite of what the Canadian companies would want. But yes, they could bring the brands here. In some ways, Canopy is already trying that, right? That's where Constellation has that equity stake in Canopy. Canopy has a relationship with Acreage, and you're getting Canopy's brands already in the United States via Acreage. So directly, you're already getting Constellation's cannabis brands in the US in a very indirect fashion today. They're here.
Right.
So, hey, Bill, what do you think the plan is to do with what they've built in Canada then? Because if you can't import weed, then are they going to try and maybe repurpose that equipment down here in the States? Or what are they going to do with those monstrous facilities?
Sell them, Jordan. I love it. They're going to sell them for pennies on the dollar. They already have. Pretty much any greenhouse asset that they rushed to put up, and they all were promising we can grow 500,000 kilograms a year of weed. And the problem is when everybody's trying to grow that much weed and it's not particularly good weed, there's no market for it. No one wants to buy it. The black market has better weed and cheaper prices. So all those facilities are, and I'll send you some, they're for sale. And if you want to go up to Canada and buy a big weed greenhouse, you can do it quite cheaply these days. Things that cost tens of millions of dollars to build are being sold for less than $1 million.
Damn. And they can't can they export that anywhere right now?
They can take it to Europe. They could probably take it to Australia. And the problem is a lot of those markets are pretty protectionist themselves. They say, we want local growers. The other problem is if you are open to take imports, say you're a country in Europe and you're open to take imports, Canada is not the best place to grow weed anyway. It's cold.
Right.
It's not the best weather for growing weed. So
Well, that's the thing that, it's like a tundra up there. And so it, like you said, it's more expensive because a lot of it's like hydroponic and all that shit. Down here, like in Iowa, you could probably section off about 1,000 acres and supply all the weed for the whole country. I mean, isn't outdoor planting, even though it's not as good, if you're going to get the essential oil of the THC out, can't you just grow a bunch of it? And then I don't know. I think somebody told me that, but I'm not even sure if it's true.
well, and that's going to be California for the U.S. If interstate commerce is ultimately available, that's going to be California. California is going to supply the weed, and frankly, California would probably be the brands too. I mean, most of those kind of younger trends, whether it was energy drinks years ago or coffee years ago, go west to east, right? They start out west, and the brands end up, the best brands out west end up being the best brands on the east. But to the point of the Canadians, if in European countries open to imports, why not take it from somewhere like South America, who's really, really good at growing it, right? If you're open to buying it from a different country, why spend 10x the price of taking it from a Canadian, spend 1/10 the price by taking it from a Colombian? And
right. And you get the cocaine shipments in the same, in the same container. And it's like, just kidding. Of course not. That'd be illicit. So go ahead, Jen. I'm not going to hog. This is your head. I'm not going to hog this time.
Well, no. I mean, I get him all the time, literally all the time, because we both work from home, but we really like each other. So it works, except for like, some very short periods of time. So before we move on.
We'd like to hear more about that. Let's get to the shit that people really want to hear about. We want to hear about y'all's relationship.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just kidding. Let's keep it professional. Keep it Biscuit. Keep it professional.
Well, Bill does the dishes every night, but I clean a lot.
What a prince.
And I cook a lot.
I eat the food, so it's kind of only fair.
Exactly.
And you play this frisbee golf, which I'm fascinated with. But that, you know what? Let's save that for later.
No. Let's talk about the frisbee golf.
Well, so Harry, if we're going to go here,
okay, all right.
I know where this is going.
Plenty of acres, quite a wide variety of land in terms of type and elevation changes, open areas, wooded areas. I think you have the makings of a destination frisbee golf course on your property.
Oh, do you? Well, because so far, everybody has told me that my land is only suitable for goats, at 20 cents an acre, or houses at like 25,000 an acre. So I'm either going to be rich or I'm be a goat herder. And I think I'd prefer to be a goat herder, actually.
The froth guys can contribute like 1 cent an acre would be my best guess.
Then we're in. I'm in it for the fun. And I think I'd be not good at it. I'm not good at esports, but I think I would be not embarrassing at it. Like I can throw a frisbee. I know how to keep it level, not, throw it up and it comes back and hits you in the head. I know not to do that.
That would be a boomerang.
And by the way, I don't know what this giant bruise. This looks like I've been like cooking up meth. I have been in North Texas, but like, good Lord, I don't know what happened there. I think I was trying to.
I've been in North Texas.
I have. Everybody there is either on meth or disembarking and embarking on boats, and jet skis are not my forte. There's definitely falls, trips and falls, slips. There's slip and falls. Anyway, so go ahead. We're wasting time. I'm sorry. Well, I'll cut this bullshit later.
No, this is the juicy stuff. Well, before we get into, speaking of things we argue about, sometimes we argue about beer, what's a good company, what's not. But I don't really have so much knowledge of the cannabis industry. So Bill, what are the cannabis industries that you think are the best positioned in the US right now?
On the cannabis side?
Yeah.
So ideally, you'd want to be in a state that has limited licenses, right? If you're a retailer, you don't want to compete with infinite other retailers. You want to compete with the only retailer in that zip code that's allowed to be there, and that's you, right? You want very limited retail licenses. We kind of talked about brands. So we want brands from kind of the West Coast that have a really big following in those key heavy consumption markets, California, Pacific Northwest. And that leads you down a path of not that many companies, right? I mean, that's Curaleaf, which I cover. They bought a brand called Select. They're putting it in tons of outlets. It's in over 2,000 retail stores. They don't own 2,000 retail stores, so other competitors want their brand, right? They took a brand from the West Coast, and now there's about 1,900 retail locations that aren't theirs that want that brand. And I think that's where people will distinguish themselves. They're already profitable. Retail, who knows what legislative changes might happen there, but brands will be where the value is. It's not going to be too different than what you guys know and love in beer, right? It's brands are where the money is. The growing of the wheat and barley, not so much.
So you think it's unlikely that there's going to be a big East Coast brand?
There probably will be.
Yeah.
I would say the most likely places would be West Coast, but yeah, there could definitely be East Coast brands. The East Coast, with that denser kind of population through a lot of it, has a really good black market, right? In New York City, it's going to be hard to displace the black market because it's very mature. They all do delivery to all the apartments. It's very easy to get black market cannabis that's quality and cheap in New York City. So opening up a dispensary, might convert some people, but plenty of people just stay with what they're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned interstate commerce, right? How likely do you think those lanes are to change upon federal legalization? I mean, I guess your guess is as good as anyone's, but it's probably better than most.
Well, so I'm going to say that federal legalization is not going to happen for a while.
Okay. How long?
A long time.
Okay.
Pessimistically long time if you're a cannabis company.
And why is that?
Well,
Reefer badness.
We're already coming up on midterm elections, right? So it's going to be hard to get votes from the Republican side when, on the Democratic bill that's been proposed so far. Why cross the aisle now when, you might pick up more seats and more leverage later, right? So you're close to a midterm election, which makes it politically hard. But also the cannabis industry is not organized at all. The lobbying bodies are very fragmented because everybody wants something different, right? To Jenn's point, someone like Constellation or Altria, who have stakes in Canadian cannabis companies, they want interstate commerce, right? They don't have a big asset base that exists in the US. They would love interstate commerce, set up big operations in ideal places, and then move it all around the country. The existing US companies do not want interstate commerce. They want Florida grown weed to only be sold in Florida and New York grown weed only to be sold in New York, because that's where their business model is today. That's where they're making all their money today. And that growing operation that right now is extremely profitable in, say, somewhere in the Northeast, if interstate commerce is available, it's an immediately useless asset, right? If you want to grow weed in Vermont, it's going to be expensive like it would be in Canada. And if interstate commerce is permissible, that asset of Vermont's no good anymore. California.
That's so interesting. I didn't even think of that. But of course, everybody's circling their wagons because they've had this head start, selling within states and adhering to the state laws. And then if it's federally legal, they're going to want to keep that. It's kind of, it's similar to repeal in the beer industry, because if you remember, I'm sure you do, they repealed, near beer before beer. They 3-2 beer, like, 8 months before full beer, and then beer another 8 months before liquor. I may have the months wrong. Please don't Twitter, just lay off. I may not have it exactly right, but you get the point. And then once they federally made it wide open, the states just closed up and said, we're going to protect. And, and then we've had 50 years of lawsuits. And this isn't your purview, but I'm sure we're going to see, because interstate commerce is a right in the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. So I'm wondering if we're going to see another 50 years of lawsuits when you can't protect your state weed.
Well, if call it the incumbents, the U.S. companies they aren't lobbying for full legalization because they want to remain protected. They want this little state structure. The big players, either the Canadians or call them Constellation and Altria, want interstate commerce. So you don't have a unified group of people going to the politicians for like a consistent ask. Everybody's asking for something very different, and so nothing gets done.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I mean, and that's probably the reason why we won't see it for another 2 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you say a long time, are you talking a couple years or like a decade?
In between the two,
Okay.
six-ish.
All right.
I think the next two are hard with the midterms, and then at that point, if so, the Democratic controlled group hasn't been able to do it in kind of the first 100 days of their power, then it's probably not happening during their term. So that's 4, right? That's 4 years. It's 2 more, or 2.5 more, or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to see anything less than multiple years.
Well, that's a good segue to go into beer, right?
Well, and who knows? Like it's interesting because the states are like standing up to the federal government, right? They're like, we don't care what your rule is. We're making these rules for cannabis. And there was a time in beer where the states were still doing that, right? And I'm going to mess up the year, but maybe Harry will have me here. In 1988, 89, Wyoming was still 18 years old, even though the federal law was 21, right? So you have a history of states standing up to the federal rules for beer. You have now a precedent today of the states standing up to the federal rules for cannabis. I mean, why? What's to stop a state to say we're going to go back to 18? What's to stop a temperate state from saying we're going to go to 25? Right? Who knows? You might have weird states might feel more empowered than they ever have been on these type of products, and if they're already defying on cannabis, why not defy and go back to 18 if you're Wyoming?
The reason is because the federal government illegally, I think, withholds highway funds from states that don't have a 21-year-old drinking age. Like even my father filed suit when that went down, and he was like, that's the federal government telling the states how to regulate alcohol, which is what the 21st Amendment prohibits. But you want the highway funds, right? You want Louisiana and Wyoming, you're right, were the last 2 states. And that's why they have the shittiest highways.
Yeah, there's a noticeable difference when you go down I-10 and cross Texas into Louisiana.
Right.
You hear it. You hear
That's
it
more than the
car.
roads, Jordan.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to quote something that you said that I really liked, Bill. You ready for this? The disparity between you didn't say this, I'm paraphrasing. The disparity between total beer BPI and seltzer BPI, which is a distributor purchasing intent that's kind of a leading indicator, is the widest since 2016. Now, here's a quote. We like to say that craft beer is just beer, which I totally agree with. Well, now it is beginning to look like seltzer is just beer. To this point, Premium Lights had an August BPI reading of 57.1, near parity to F&B and seltzers at 57.3. Light beer and seltzer have the same purchase intent right now in August. So you wanted to segue to beer. That's my segue, Jen.
Distributor purchase intent. Yeah.
Right.
And that said, perfect segue. Bill, top picks in beer. What are your top picks?
The people who sell the least amount of seltzer.
There you go.
The seltzer.
He said it here, folks. Wow. Who would have thought in June anybody would say that? But it's true.
It's tricky because they said it was going to keep growing, right? I mean, people are still, and I think I saw an interview, Jen, that you did recently, that Boston Beer is still saying 20 share. Seltzer's going to get to 20 share of beer. My best guess is it stays at 8 to 11 for a really long time. I don't think it goes away. It's hard to get that big and go away, but it stays in that 10-ish range like craft beer did, right? Fine, 10. And I think what happens is the companies that promised all that seltzer growth, they spent for all that seltzer growth, whether they were bringing in capacity or firing out ads or researching innovation. So their cost structure becomes a little bit bloated with growth that never materializes. And that requires a whole different type of investor, right? You have people who like to invest for growth, and they like to chase things that are growthy and on fire, and categories that have dominant market share leaders. That's fine, but that's not what this is anymore. So those investors have to leave, and they get more value-oriented investors to come back eventually. People who care that Boston Beer is going to bring production in-house of their seltzers. One day that's super powerful for their costs, but right now the current investors don't care about that part of the story too much. So you kind of need to roll over your investor base a little bit, which
so there's like there's like these kind of hyper growth investors. They're out of the game now, probably, after CNN or CNBC said seltzers are dead, or whatever. And then now you have more value. I'm just repeating what you're saying so that me as a 8-year-old can understand it. You have more value investors that are like getting, during defensive times, maybe beer's a good play.
Yeah, they'll be the same people that bought Boston Beer before Angry Orchard blew up, or the same people in a good way, or the same people that bought Boston Beer before Truly took off, right? Those are the people. They'll wait. There's no rush for them to get involved, because I don't know what on the innovation slate can become the next Truly just yet. But they'll wait, and they'll monitor the data. They'll check out Nielsen. They'll check out IRI. And when they start to see any little signs of a new brand catching on, maybe that's the time they're comfortable getting involved.
And that, let's be honest. There's always another Angry Orchard. There's always another Sam Adams. There's always another Twisted Tea. There's always another Truly.
For one company.
For one company.
Other companies have missed all those waves.
I know, but my point is Boston Beer going to come up with the next hot thing, or at least be right on the trail of the next hot thing, like they always have been? Bet against them, you're going to lose, because so far they always pretty much have been there. I would say the only kind of falter they had was, Sam Adams Light wasn't a big hit. But they've had some failures, but good Lord. What's your call on Sam, by the way?
I'm neutral right now. We had a buy back when everything was dark and terrible in March of 2020. We put a buy on it. In kind of that, here comes a seltzer summer was the call, despite COVID fears and all those things. We took it off because last fall we started to see seltzer fall off, and let's see if I do this right, but fall off in October, November more sharply than it had any other year. And things are supposed to show less seasonality when they get bigger, right? Seltzer was bigger than it ever had before, and fell off steeper last fall than it ever had before. And that's when we got a little worried. But I think what happens with Boston Beer is when they get something right, the stock doubles or triples, right? The stock does incredibly well when they get something right. So if you're an investor, you can wait, and maybe you miss the first 20% move of the stock, right? Maybe it goes up 20% as they start to figure out the next home run. But that doesn't matter. You can risk that losing out on missing that 20%, because you're about to get 100% more after that 20%. So they'll wait. The investors will wait. They'll wait to see when it starts happening. And if it starts happening, they'll jump on again.
If I were an investor in beer stocks, which I'm not, obviously it's not cool for me. I would wait for a bottle recall. There's one every 5 years. There's bound to be another bottle recall. Just wait for that. Buy on the weakness. Look at me. I'm a stock analyst now. Brilliant. By the way, do not invest money on I am not a licensed blah, blah, blah.
It's bound to happen, right? Glass is super tight right now, right? Everything's been tight, but it seems to like rotate. It was cardboard, and then it was cans, and then now it's glass, and it's kind of always something. But when that stuff's tight, you run into recall issues, right? The last time glass was super, super tight was when AB, I think, and I might mess this up a little bit, but AB was supplying the glass to Constellation, and they had recalls then, right? That was kind of the last, I forget, it was 2014. I don't know, somewhere back.
Yes, I was on spring break, and as usual, every time I go on spring break with my ex-wife and kids, which is why probably it's an ex-wife, some major news would break. And that was, Bill Hackett calling me, get off the slopes. I need to talk to you. AB screwing us. Turns out it was just a mistake. So,
Yeah. And I was still on maternity leave, and Harry wrote something salacious, and poor Jordan had to hide under the desk like it was a hurricane drill with all the mad calls that came in.
I didn't
But-
send it. I didn't send it, and I thought Harry had forgot about it. And then he woke up in the morning and was like, "What the hell?
Why didn't you send it?"
that?" And then I hid under my desk for the rest of the day.
But let me ask you this, Bill. I mean, because we're talking about beer supply issues, right? How much do you think beer supply issues like we're seeing right now across the board deters market investors?
Some of the people are having supply issues because demand's still been really strong, right?
Mhm.
And when I go into HEB or Walmart, I see pretty thin Constellation shelves.
Oh yeah.
And it's mostly because people are buying it through quite quickly. But it's still lost sales, and no one likes lost sales. Lost sales generally require more marketing spend some other time to convince people to come back and convince people you have the product. And so I think that has been an issue for folks. I think what's scaring most folks the most is seeing White Claw in the Nielsen numbers, right? White Claw down more than Anheuser-Busch or Molson Coors. And that's scary because they don't have an on-premise to offset that Nielsen data, right? They don't have a channel shift that's helping that Nielsen number. That Nielsen number is pretty darn representative of what's going on, and that's a big negative number. And so I think that and seltzer is what's deterring investors the most. The supply issue, yes, but kind of a secondary issue.
Well, I was just gonna say, who do you think is benefiting from the slowdown in seltzer? Do you think Constellation? I mean, they're about the only one growing in scan data now. Is it just because imports always continue to do well, and that's just what's happening still? Or do you think some people are kind of taking back the people that said, okay, I tried seltzer, it's not for me? Where are those people going, you think?
I think some of it's light beer, but I think you got it. I think more of it would be Constellation, right? For a lot of people, that seltzer occasion was like an outdoor, better weather. You can see it by the seasonality, but it's kind of an outdoor party occasion, and that's Constellation's brand image, right? It's find your beach. It started as a real beach, but then it became any outdoor celebratory gathering place. So if people were using seltzer for that, and they don't want to use seltzer for that as much as they previously did, they go back to Constellation, right? I think it is Corona. I think it's Modelo. I think it's Pacifico, and those are great brands for exactly capturing that.
And you mentioned your top picks are anyone producing less seltzer, so Constellation at the top of your list.
Molson Coors does even less.
Okay.
Seltzer. Constellation, 3 points ish to beer. It was their seltzer last year, but that's declining a lot.
Yeah.
So, they have their issues on seltzer. Molson Coors was less last year, at least, was less than 3 points to their portfolio. Europe has reopened for Molson Coors, which is a huge on-premise market for them, and they are, for the first time in a long time, taking more chances. They're trying to innovate. They're trying to find brands and trends. 10, 15, 20 years ago, all their innovation was just a different label on the same cans, right? And that was the extent of their innovation. Now it's actually trend chasing, trend finding, brand development. So they're doing things that can actually lead to growth, maybe not immediately, but gives them a chance to grow while they don't have the seltzer headwind. And even within seltzer, Topo Chico is year over year growth for them, right? Year over year, Topo Chico's new. So that's a positive number for them. Whereas Corona Seltzer is a negative number year over year, White Claw is a negative number year over year. Truly not yet, but truly could be a negative number year over year here at some point. It's a positive number right now for Molson Coors.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but expert beer industry journalist Jenn Litz-Kirk interviewed Pete Marino, Molson Coors, this morning.
That's right.
And, it was his birthday yesterday, and I said, Pete, happy fucking birthday for that kiss on the mouth,
Yeah, so that's topical. There's nothing wrong with loving your friends, Harry,
He's no friend. We're business It's all business.
Oh, right. Sorry, I forgot. You guys weren't friends way before.
No,
You haven't been friends for decades.
you don't make friends in this business.
Just wives.
Just wives.
Just ex-wives.
Uh-oh.
Hello. Yeah, y'all's generations has it more figured out than we did, I think, on that front. This is, I mean, who knew we had this brilliant resource right under the same roof? I mean, this was a great podcast. This was a value add and entertaining podcast. Can I
might
say
have
that?
to wash the dishes tonight.
Yeah. You know what, Bill? You did well. You did. I mean, not to that sound patronizing. I didn't mean that. Not like you're some kid. I mean, what I meant was, you know what? You came on here. You had your wife ask you the tough questions. You answered them well. We've got a dog that's so fascinated with you and all the things that you said that she's sleeping on it, contemplating. This is long form podcasting, Bill. You just say whatever you want and then you cut out the bullshit later.
Well, what do the kids say? Smash that like button, smash that subscribe.
Man, I have never said that.
Well,
Because I don't know why. I guess because they want more empty. You know what? Hey guys, smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button, smash it hard, smash it 3 times, go to all your friends' phones and smash it, and leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. That jumps you in the ratings. And that is important because if you want to find the pod, it is hard to find because we get 500 downloads every time. That's not bad. But it's not, we're not Joe Rogan over here. So go ahead and leave some 5. If you don't like the pod and you want to leave a bad review, then just don't. Just turn it off and go home. But if you like it, then leave a 5-star and a positive review. Okay? Is everybody clear? Is everybody clear on that?
and we validate parking, so you're good there.
We always validate parking. All right, Bill. Well, anything else, Jordan?
No, thank you for being on, Bill.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for doing it.
No, it's awesome. Let's do it again. Let's make it like a quarterly thing if that's cool with you.
For sure.
All right. And Bill, because you've been so cool to appear on our podcast, I would like to offer you a free seat at the Beer, Wine, and Spirits Summits in January at the Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego. And a free hotel room. But you have to share it with one of our employees. And you have to share your seat at the summit with one of our with Jenn. No,
And you have to wear a name tag that says Jenn's concubine and actually do it this time and actually walk around with it this time.
It was the Hotel Del where that name tag was first made.
And I think you sat up in the room like an actual concubine and didn't walk around with it.
You sat up in the room like a concubine? Oh my god.
That's back when he actually was my concubine.
Yeah, he's probably sneaking down and buying things on your tab like a concubine would. Like buying hats and bathing suits and sunglasses.
Who's
Are you the concubine? That's such a great word. It's not used enough lately. Concubine.
It's okay when we reverse it. Like if he couldn't make that joke about me, of course, but I can make it about him because he's a male.
Right. So. Yeah. No, you are not my concubine. I can't make that joke, especially with an animal. That's even worse.
On that note, Bill.
On that note, well, listen, happy Labor Day. Glad everybody had a good one. Thanks, Bill, for being on. I appreciate it. And listen, thank you for drinking beer. I have like 8 microphones for Jenn that I have to drop off in Austin. So I'll probably see you within a week.
That works.
All right, pal. Y'all take care.